Let's have a look for now after the first week has ended of Season 3, and we are just entered our second week of the season, where, by the way, we have our largest power boost of the probably first couple of months of the season before Turbo Boost. This is the moment where we gain our biggest chunk of power all at once, because you're getting presumably both of your crafts, 720 item level crafts this week, if not a single two-handed weapon. I'm assuming most players will now complete their 4-piece tier set for this season in this reset, and then also you get, hopefully you were lucky and you got a myth track item from your vault all at once at the beginning of this week, right? So massive power jump. And with this power, we go and check the raid to look at some of the, or rather the best performers so far. So we're not trying to laugh at the ones doing terribly. We don't want to show you the list here and telling you, laugh at Balanced Druid, let's laugh at Beast Mastery, what about Arms Warrior? Let's just leave them in their misery. Instead, let's look at the better performers. The number one right now, the best performer overall, is Elemental Shaman. Now, this is a bit rare. It doesn't happen always or very often, but you know, right before the season releases, you get your simulations, the predictions basically on the damage of the specs at their full power. And it's not always a one-to-one transition. It's not that just because, for example, you were expecting Elemental Shaman to have the most damage in single target before the season comes out, and then to have that spec also be the strongest. However, in this case, that's what we have this season. The one that was predicted or expected to be simming the highest and doing the most damage is also the strongest one. A lot of the power of this elemental comes from their hero talent Farseer. It's not even about elemental itself, because of course Stormbringer is quite poor. It's because Farseer allows you to play one target, single target or AoE, without having to sacrifice too much in your hero talent, because most of your damage comes from just your ancestors duplicating your damage. So if you're blasting lava bursts in single target, they will just deal single target damage. If you're blasting chain lightning in AoE, they will just use chain lightning in AoE. So you can have situations like Lumitar, where it's almost completely single target, and you have the highest single target as expected, but then you can also move to a more AoE padding fight like Soulbinder, and then you can see the AoE damage that the ancestors can do by you very simply spamming Chain Lightning and Earthquake, and your ancestors copying you and trying to do some AoE themselves, which is also going to basically out-damage yourself. I know, it's a bit humiliating, right, to have some grandpa ghosts around you actually be stronger than you. It's a bit sad, but I doubt at the end of the fight, once you look at the meters, the shamans will be sad about it. This allows them to have a very, flexible damage profile, because you can move on from single target boss to AoE boss to maybe 2 or 3 target damage, where you can still funnel advantages, right? You can use Flame Shock, you can put it on a bunch of different enemies. More ticks of Flame Shock means more resets with your Lava Surge for more charges of Lava Burst, so more damage, which you can funnel in single target. Think about, for example, the P1 of Dimensius when you spawn the 2 adds. Or even better, the intermission of Dimensius when there is 50 different adds spawning. Yes, the damage on them doesn't matter, but you can still gain advantages from simply them being there, for example. And this is very good right now for the damage profile of Elemental. If you've been checking, for example, the Race to World First going on right now, they are even now triple stacking Elemental Shaman. Now, one of the biggest and most important things you will have towards the end of this tier is the fact that the last 2 bosses, Nexus King and Dimensius, have a 100% damage taken increase phase. So obviously, burst damage is also something you would want to have in your spec because of those 2 bosses, which are also the most important ones. And guess what? Elemental has good single target, they have good AoE, they can also funnel for more single target damage, and they can also have burst damage. Very good in damage amp phases. So in short, it's basically hard to find a major weakness of the spec right now. Even gimmicks like guilds thinking about re-rolling their entire roster into Drak tier to dealing with Dimensius mechanics. Well, Elemental Shaman might not even need to be Drak tier, because they have Gust of Wind and they can negate knockbacks once every 20 seconds, which is more than enough for the P1 of Dimensius, for example. So they also have a way to deal with that. So overall, if we were to look at right now the best performer in the raid, that's Elemental Shaman. The second one is Destro. Now, technically, Destro was just slightly below Demonology before the latest round of nerfs, which put them basically very close to each other. Now, at the moment, Demo has other problems to worry about, which is the fact that Demo is basically unplayable on Dimensius as long as they keep losing their pets every time they change platforms. That's kind of a problem. But Destro does have some very powerful tools, because Destro's power has often been one of two things: A, massive AoE. Rain of Fire, the compounding buffs in your talents that give you more shards, make Rain of Fire cost less, you can spam it more and more, it just goes out of control. Or two targets, fights like, for example, Magzi, where you have the adds that spawn, they spawn in Africa, nobody wants to commit to go and damage them, you just have Destrolox putting Havoc on the boss and blasting the ad, or reverse. That works very well. Or even now, going back to Dimensius, when the ads spawn in P1, there is two of them. Target one, Havoc the other, it's very, very good. Even Lumitar, when the webs that you have to break spawn, even more of them in Mythic, that's also very good for Destro. What makes this very good right now in this tier is the fact that usually when Destro had that kind of power level, they didn't have a very high single target damage. The power of having a very good two target value thanks to Havoc, or even AoE damage when it was meta in Mythic Plus, was at the cost of their single target being very weak. However, that's not what's happening now. With the power of Diabolist, even if Blizzard tried to nerf Diabolist multiple times, Destro still has very good overall single target damage. Yes, it is still Destro, so we're not talking quite like TBC Destro, but we are close. So we're still talking about Chaos Bolt, Incinerate, Conflagrate ever since the rework. Now you get to use Soulfire a bit more, but in general it's still very simple as a spec. But the damage is super high in single target, and they still retain the very good things they have as Destro. Like for this tier is Havoc. That can be very powerful in all of these fights where you want to focus down certain adds, even things like Araz, even if now has been nerfed to be much more doable. The adds that spawn, they copy the soul of Araz that spawns. Guess what's good for that? Havoc. So that just becomes progressively stronger and stronger if your base single target is very high, which Destro right now has. So overall, that would make them pretty much overall the second strongest one when it comes to DPS in the raid. Now, before the third DPS, let's have a moment of silence for all the poor melees who had to watch these race to world first guilds go boss to boss to boss and progressively lose more and more melee DPS, one after the other. At this point, it's like a race to how few melees can you have, how many can you cut from your comp, even going as low as only having 3 of them. So it is a bit unfortunate at the moment for the role as a whole to be this ignored. It's not even their fault in particular. We're just talking about boss mechanics and comps for the entire roster, not really because all of the melees right now happen to be super weak. They are weaker definitely than the casters, as we've just gone through our top 2, and they are both casters. And I am afraid the third one is a caster as well, because it's Arcane Mage. Yes, just like what we said in our first look at The Sims, where Frost Mage was ahead of Arcane. And it had been ahead for quite a while. Even after Frost was nerfed, it was still ahead. But our question was, yeah, sure, but Arcane has burst damage. They have burst damage windows, something that Frost Mage doesn't really have nearly as well, or doesn't do nearly as good as Arcane does. So it would have been possibly, more unlikely for Frost Mage to make it out over Arcane. And right now the answer is a resounding yes. At the moment, Arcane not only is more played than Frost, it's actually the most played caster in Mythic. So Arcane does have, as mentioned, the better burst window, although still, to be clear, is still not extremely strong. but it definitely does the job more than Frost Mage does. They have similar advantages as both Elemental and Destro, like the ability to funnel. After all, that is similar to what they have been able to do in Mythic Plus, in targeting the higher HP, the more dangerous enemies when you're pulling 15 mobs and doing more damage to the main target. They can also pull that off in some of these fights in Mythic Plus. They can use the adds on Soulbinder to do more single target damage. They can use the adds on Araz as well. One of the weaknesses of being target capped in here doesn't really matter because this isn't Mythic Plus. The adds spawning in a raid are usually going to be 2, 3, 4, you know, at best. So Arcane Barrage does the job more than fine in these fights. So this has kept them to be essentially very, very good. They will have, as mentioned, a very high value when it comes to burst phases. Okay, being able to pull off the burst window on the double damage window of Saladar, of Nexus King, and of Dimensius will be very valuable for an Arcane Mage, for example. And then you also have the various passive bonuses given to you by Blizzard, your father, to you, your favorite son. You have many of the mechanics that you can neutralize in this raid, like knockbacks, for example, but also heavy mobility required with your 54 different blinks, as well as alter time, as well as multiple defensives. So if we had to look at right now the 3 better performers when it comes to the raid in this first week and the first couple of days of the second week of results, the trio of Elemental, Arcane, and Warlock. So I guess the bluish, dark bluish, purplish color palette of specs are the ones doing best right now. When it comes to tanks in the raid, well, nobody cares. When it comes to healers in the raid, the outlier, the number one, then would have to be, of course, Preservation Evoker. Now, while not being quite at the same level of OP-ness as they were at the release of this expansion in Season 1 when Flame Shaper was brand new, this is not nearly as strong. But it is, as usual, as it often happens, that the healer that gets the spotlight is the burst healer. Is the healer assigned with healing, you know, in waves more so than in inconsistent healing? Because I guess it's more flashy, right? It looks cooler. The power given to them this season from their tier set is very big. The 4-piece set bonus, which makes you consuming essence bursts after you casted your engulfs, create essence bombs that blow up, essentially extends your burst window after your engulfs by 10-12 more seconds. And it also for once actually changes your rotation, changes the way you think, because now your job for the next 12 seconds is how can I generate as many essence bursts as I can so I can consume them and create these essence bombs. So you have to start doing things like Temporal Anomaly, first of all, now enters your stasis. Usually it was Dream Breath, now it gets replaced by TA, and then you can Living Flame yourself to then recreate all those Living Flames on the echoes, because Living Flame has a chance to create an essence burst. So if you duplicate it like 7 times, it's almost a guarantee that you're getting 2 essence bursts, so you can pop them for more AoE healing. So their style of burst healing is still there. It has slightly changed from Season 1 of this expansion. But as we mentioned in Season 2, when Discipline was the pick, it was either one of the two. If in Season 1 Evoker is stronger, then Discipline is not played. If in Season 2 Discipline is stronger, Evoker isn't played. Now Evoker is stronger, therefore Discipline isn't played. That's sort of how it goes. Plus the benefits of this tier, as we mentioned, things like knockbacks on Dimensius, completely irrelevant for an Evoker. You also have the double up, where you can help other specs with things like Rescue, which was already very relevant ever since Evokers were released back in Vault during Razageth, you know, requiring Evokers to save the priests in that fight. And right now they have been showing to be the stronger ones overall. Still not a massive gain. We're talking about even just after the first, you know, 8 days or so, Evoker is like 7% ahead overall compared to the second best, when in Season 1 it used to be like 20%. So we're still it's still a much more even affair. It's just that in terms of damage profile, it always tends to be the more unique one right next to Discipline, and at the moment Discipline is just far below Preservation when it comes to the raid, so they take the cake as far as the power level in the raid goes. Of course, still, if you're looking at the race to world first, you've also been seeing yourself the value put on the Evokers. The only spec they have been thinking about doubling up in the latter harder bosses have been the Evokers, also for offering other benefits like mob control, ad control for crowd control on things like Araz, it was very helpful, as well as things like Time Spiral, also very useful on these kind of bosses like Dimensius. So if all of this couples up with the current healing power they have, they net out to be the strongest healer at the beginning of this tier. So paired together with the best performing DPS right now, Elemental, Destro, and Arcane Mage. This is obviously, of course, just the beginning of the second week, so we will see later down the line, especially because not everything hinges on what the top guilds progressing right now in the later bosses, right? It might change quickly besides just what they choose to have in their comp, but that's what we have seen ourselves so far after this reset and a couple of days of the new one. So for this said and out of the way on this Thursday, I have to go out and shop for some groceries before... Actually, I don't have anything to do this evening. Either way, we are still leaving each other for today. Thanks, of course, everyone for having watched the video, together with, of course, everyone else who has been supporting completely for free by liking and commenting down below, as well as subscribing to the channel itself. Now, with these things out of the way, thank you guys again for watching. See you guys tomorrow, and in the meantime... Well, I'm not really sure exactly, but apparently I lost track of what I was meant to say right now.